When I played at my toy piano and I found that it didn't have a sharp, it only painted notes, I cried and said, "This piano's no good." And I looked under the piano. I thought maybe it fell down.
Remember the days when families sat around the radio together, listening to such shows as the Firestone Hour.
Cubes presents next a rousing and well-known song from the talented pen of Zucca. It's entitled, "I Love Life."
I love life, so I want to live and drink of life's fullness, take all it can give.
And when television came into our living rooms, we not only continued to hear about Zucca, but now we got to see her taking her bows and receiving accolades for her many accomplishments.
I Love Life here in our audience this evening, Zucca. I wonder if we can have her. Zucca, will you stand up and take, there she is, world famous composer and...
My husband said to me one day, you know the Richard store? You don't know the Richard store. That used to belong to us.
Right.
He said, I wish you'd write something. I stopped writing for a few when I first got married. So he said, write something. So when he came back, I wrote a piece called The Prelude. He said, that's very nice, but that isn't what I want. So the next day, I wrote another piece called The Bolero, which I dedicated to Arthur Rubinstein. He said, that isn't what I want. I said, what do you want? He said, I want a song. I said, well, write the lyric. And then I'll write the song. So he wrote the song, the lyric, "I Love Life." And the next day he came home for lunch, and I said, I wrote that song. I said, I don't think you'll like it. I played it for him. He says, I do. I says, you do? I don't like it. Really?
I love life, it holds me in its way. My heart hears its music, a melody gladsome and gay.
But I Love Life was far from being the only song for which Zucca became famous. It was one of over 2,000 of her compositions that were published during her writing career, which spanned over 85 years.
Sometimes when I'm writing music, my hand, it's like I don't know what I'm writing, but my hand just goes free and it writes beautiful music. Well, it's a mystery and I never really understand how it works.
One of her earliest works was Valse Brillante, written when she was only 11. Mana's performance career goes back even earlier.
When I was 8, I played with the New York Philharmonic. I played the Beethoven Concerto. That's the youngest one that ever played with the Philharmonic. Oh, I always sat with God when I played. I always made a room. My brother would say, see how she's moving up? She's making room for God to sit with her. And I always used to talk to him when I was playing. And there's some spots I didn't know so well. I say, please watch these notes. I should play this very well. I never made a mistake in those bad spots because I knew that God was taking care of it. I felt that he was a good friend of mine. And when I walked out on the stage, I had my hand like this. My brother would say, she's holding God's hand. I used to walk with God, you know. Nobody saw him, only I saw him, you know. Funny. He was very tangible to me, you know. He was a good friend of mine. My real name is Gisela Zucca, Z-U-C-C-A-M-A-N, Zucca Man. My father was Polish. They didn't know how to spell it, you know. So they gave him the name of Samuel Zuckerman, which is never his name, you know. And I was a child, I never heard anybody being called Gisela. It's a pretty name. but I didn't like it. I didn't know it. So I gave myself a name Vivian for a year. Then I gave myself a name of Gertrude for 2 months. So finally, I was called Dolly, you see. My teacher said, you can't play with the name of Dolly with the Beethoven Concerto in Carnegie Hall. There's an Augusta, the Empress of Germany, and I will make you Augusta, the Empress of Piano. And that's how that name started, you see. And I didn't like that either. So when I got my father's autobiography, I saw his name was Zucca. And I said, oh, I like that name. I'm going to keep my real name. So I called myself Zucca. And then Zucca. And I turned it around to Zucca.
In the early years, acclaim came from many people. One of the most notable was Puccini.
Mr. Morandoni, he was the conductor of Metropolitan Opera. He came to me one day. We were good friends. He said, I'm going to Italy, and I'm going to see Puccini. And he wrote me, would I bring some American compositions with me? He would like to see them. Would you give me some of your songs? Oh, I said, I'd be delighted. And when he came back in the fall, he said, I have such good news for you. I showed Puccini about 50 songs, and he picked your song out as the best song, and he said that a young American fella is the most talented composer in America. So Morandoni said, would you like to see a picture of that a young fellow? He said, yes. So he showed him my picture. He said, the girl wrote this?
Mana continued with her exceptional creative output until the age of 97, and it was 80 years before that, at age 17, when she composed this concerto.
Wake up at about 2 o'clock, and I had an idea, something would come to me, and I'd write something. Many pieces I wrote I composed in my sleep.
Aside from the rich musical legacy she left us, no one who ever knew Mana will ever forget her wonderful anecdotes.
Tell you a funny story. Mr. Monet, with whom I concertized, all over Europe, he wrote a lovely piece, scherzo, and he wanted me to learn it, so I learned it to play. And the first performance I gave of that was in Lodz in Poland. So he said, I'm going up in the box to listen to you play this piece, the scherzo. And I started to play. When I got to the first page, I got stuck. So I started it over again, Nobody knew that piece. And I got to that page. My mind was on that spot. I got that spot. Again, I did it 4 times. I couldn't get ahead of that first page. So I began to improvise. And I looked up in the box. I didn't see him anymore. I said, I think I must have killed him. He must have died. And so improvised all my technical things, and I finally hit the 13th page, and I finished the page. Paper said I played a new piece by Manet, a very odd piece. I said to Manet, what happened to you? He said, after you did that the 4th time, I got hysterical, so I got on the floor. I didn't want anybody to see me.